and welcome to the Oriire podcast, the podcast that tells African stories. I'm Sesi.
Salut tout le monde. Je m'appelle Haleemah. The topic we're going to be discussing on this week's episode is how far should cultural preservation go? So, comment ça va, Sesi?
Ça va bien. I'm good, thank you. Today, I think Haleemah is introducing us to French, which is widely spoken in parts of Africa.
Yep. So, hi guys. If you're like from Burkina Faso, Benin, and Cameroon, anywhere that French is spoken on the African continent, hi, bonjour, oh hi.
Okay. So, today, as Haleemah said, we're going to talk about cultural preservation and how far it should go. So basically, to me, I think culture is essential. It's important to preserve it, especially because it's like your heritage, you know. It's just something that you have to remember, you have to learn from, you feel like it's part of you as well. But then at the same time, I feel like culture and tradition are things that, like, you should know about it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to follow it to the letter, like a lot of people seem to think. So it's a thing that, like, you learn from and you pick your lessons, and then, you keep going with those traditions that are good, and you kind of have to discard the ones that are harmful.
Yeah, and I think especially in this like 21st century, it's important to acknowledge culture, but we also need to like progress in life. So while culture is important to know, it's also important to know that, okay, culture is not static. It has to keep on evolving.
Yes. And it's important not to keep using it as a crutch for refusing to progress or refusing to move on with the times. Like, you just hear, people say, oh yeah, that's our culture, to justify any kind of nonsense that they do. Like, yeah, that's my culture, or like, oh, I paid the bride price of this one, I can do whatever I like to her because that's how our forefathers did it.
Yeah.
That's nonsense. So yeah, it's one of the things that we have to let go of. Although there are a lot of, traditional practices that I think, people should keep around, like the festivals.
I don't know any of that culture. Next thing that was in my head was to ask you that. So, what culture do you think we need to banish first before going to?
Okay, let's go for that one, because there's a very, very long list.
Exactly, of the one we should banish.
Yes, that people are just holding on to for no reason. Early child marriage. I mean, it's a child, man. Like, there's no way around it. A child is a child is a child. The child cannot vote. The child there are things that the child is not responsible enough for, but you think the child is responsible enough to be married and to have children. Like, it's ridiculous and it's unnecessary.
What do you think about the marriage culture in general, in like not just Nigeria? I hear it happens in most places in Africa, like the obsession with marriage. What do you think of that culture? Do you think we need to preserve it, or somehow it needs to change?
I think we really need to eliminate it, because I find it so scary and so suffocating, like, for no reason. I mean, people just carry marriage on their heads. Let's say, like, oh my God, if you're not married at this age, it means
they really do. Really do. And have you ever tried asking like older people why they do that? Like, they don't have a reason, because I've argued with so many people. I'm like, why? Just tell me one importance. Like, why does my life, or what I do in my life, why does it bother you so much? They can't say. So
and I think it's ridiculous, because it's like, I mean, definitely marriage is a beautiful thing. It's a thing that people should, people can decide that they want for their lives, and that's great. I'm married. But at the same time, I feel like it's not something that, people should feel like they have, it's do or die. It's a personal choice, it's a personal thing. And it's not something that, like, people should threaten you with or make you feel like you're lesser than, or there are so many derogatory comments, especially to women. Like, women particularly suffer from this, that, like, people say, oh, if you're 25 and not married, even 25, like, which I think is young, they're like, oh, you go to Shiloh, which is apparently like a prayer place that they have to go and pray for you. And the ages that they say, like, listen, when I hear that some people like my age are married and have children, I'm just like, really? Because to me, I'm still a baby girl. But really, to other people, they're thinking that I should already be.
your what's it called? What's this thing called? Spinster. No, I think Spinster is insulting, so I don't want to use that word. I don't know, you're an old woman, basically. To
I
most
feel like people have even made it an insult because it really shouldn't be like
exactly.
It's not bad. I have two schools of thought on that. Like, why do older people, try and basically force people into that box? And one of my schools of thought is that, this is just what they've been told is what every woman should aspire to. So it's kind of ingrained in them. They really don't even know anything different, and they can't even imagine it otherwise. And then the other school of thought, which I say a lot, is like misery loves company.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's the one I agree with.
I mean, it's not the case for everybody, but some people that are just like high married on their head, marriage, and they're not in happy marriages themselves. Like, remember recently, not very recently, but like there's been trends on Twitter with people saying like, go and ask your mother, really ask her. Like the person that you're saying, oh yes, marriage is so great, and especially men in this case, because they think of marriage as so great, and that's because whether they like to admit it or not, they have so many advantages in being married in this day and age. But they think it's women that want marriage, which is why, like, it's so funny when they have meltdowns and they're saying, why don't women want to get married these days? But people said that, I mean, okay, no, we're going too much into it now. This is not even we started talking about.
I think the purpose of that question was to like you said, marriage can be a beautiful thing. I think the aspect of like the marriage culture, for example, that happens in Africa, I think is the companionship thing, and I think that's positive. But then, like you said, most people take it's just with different types of cultures. Most people take it to the extreme. So it's like there are good aspects of it, but then people don't know when to regulate it. I think that's the word.
Yeah.
So what other
marriage, because we can be on this, or maybe this should be its own podcast episode.
Probably true.
Like talk about the African obsession with the concept of marriage. But another harmful cultural practice, which I think is just particularly, insidious, let's say, is female genital mutilation. I will never understand that. And there are people who so much like believe in this for some reason that like they would force their children to leave the UK or the US or whatever and go back home to Africa and unsuspecting children and then force them to undergo FGM. Which is just, I mean, and there's no benefit to it. Like when you think about it, scientific research, even like anecdotal from people say, there's no logical benefit to female genital mutilation. All it causes is psychological damage, physical damage, infection, infertility, just all around horrible. I think
with female genital mutilation, why most people do it is like you said about the marriage thing with your second school of thoughts. It's just a lot of people's way of life. They don't know anything better. So it's just because it really doesn't make sense. It makes absolutely no sense. But I just think it's their way of life. Like, if you speak to them, they rationalize it in the sense that they're preserving their kids or they're preserving their females so they won't be wayward. So they won't be. I think it's all just part of like females have to be this pristine, clean people that no one should look at until a certain age and blah, blah, blah. It's all just messy, honestly. So I think I agree with you. Female genital mutilation is one of those cultures that I think we need to abolish.
We really, really do. And like a lot of justification, apart from people saying, oh yeah, that's how to keep the women pure, which is ridiculous and stupid, by the way. But then they also say, oh, I did it, so like, why not you? Which is just one of my like, one of the schools of thought I hate the most in this world is that like, oh yeah, I went through it. Why can't you go through it too? Because it's the justification for so much unnecessary crap in this life that people put you through. Like if we're talking about another thing is like the bullying culture in African schools. That's another thing that people say I went through. Why can't you go through it?
Yeah.
Or like, corporal punishment for children, which is when it goes to like, really ridiculous levels. Like you hear about people cutting their children's private parts and putting pepper there, forcing them to shave their heads. And another, like, I don't understand how that is actually a punishment because it doesn't teach your child anything except how to hate you. That like really, and perhaps it also teaches them how to become better at lying and pretending. Another one, which I think is breast ironing, which is just another of those things that they do.
Okay. I remember what I wanted to say. Now, when I saw breast ironing, I remembered. So my question is, with all these like practices and everything, I just really wonder who started them. Like, why would you think sewing a child's like a female's private parts or something makes any sense. Like, who thought of that? Like, how I don't know. I just think we need to question origin of like certain cultures, because it just doesn't make sense. Because when you think about it, why would a sane person think of doing that?
You know,
Like,
when
why?
I go back to these things, like when I try and go back and think about what could possibly be the cause of breast ironing, by the way, is like literally in some African countries, they iron female children's breasts.
Mm-hmm.
They iron it with like a hot steel iron. And a lot of those things are perpetuated by women themselves because they enable the society to do this.
Yeah.
And when I go back to think about it, I'm just like, well, why? First of all, why are you betraying your own self and your own children as a woman? And why are you like even thinking that this is something that's helpful in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And I just have to think it all goes back to that kind of purity culture of women, which is just one of the, those horrible things. And those that school of thought, that mind of school of thoughts, that school of thought goes back ages ago. Yeah. Because even, in the early times, people were of the idea that which is, part of the patriarchy, which is just that, in society, it turns out that men have certain advantages.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those advantages is that they somehow have managed to convince themselves, and even a lot of women, that women should have no rights. There are these special things that only exist, to be beautiful and then to serve the man, while the man is like a full person on his own.
Yeah, but do you know, on the other hand of that, like, I get the patriarchy argument. That makes so much sense. But then thinking about it, because I recently read this article, some of the people that are fleeing from the Anglophone, Francophone Cameroon crisis into Calabar, the Calabar region of Nigeria, like to hide and stuff. So basically, some of these women, they iron the breast of their 15-year-old girls, like they iron it. I know, and this is why in 2021, and it still happens. But the thing is, it's not that their moms are enabling patriarchy or something. What the logic behind what the mother said, like some of the articles I read, was that they're trying to prevent their girls from rape and so many things. So when conflicts happen, because they're trying to, the only thing they know really, the only way they know how to protect their children, especially female children, is to make them less desirable to men, if that makes sense. So they do all these things so they will not. Yeah. So
that's the thing. They think that what they are doing is helpful to the children and it's going to prevent them from being exploited. But then the thing is that in a roundabout way, it all comes back to the beginning, in that they were made to think that, okay, so if you make someone less attractive or you cover them up, or that they won't get raped. And that's not true, because we know that people, women in
babies,
they get raped. Children, babies, they get raped. So really, there's no amount of unattractive or unappealing that you can make a woman in this society, unfortunately, that will protect them. Mm-hmm. Because, so it does go back to that, like, that's what they think, but it's really not the case. So they've been made to think that way, that, okay, it's because you are too attractive that this thing happened to you. But actually, it's not. Even if you were covered head to toe, it could have still happened to you. And that's a lot of things that people don't understand.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think this also, like, makes me think of how cultural preservation, or because people are trying to defend their culture, they keep advocating for all these xenophobic, crappy, like, ideas and everything. So,
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I when I'm just thinking about this, I'm actually deeping how many of these ideas actually stem from the school of thought that, women are property or women are less. Because there's also the phenomenon of wife inheritance in a lot of African societies, specifically. Oh, okay, I can't think of any specific right now. I believe it was part of Igbo culture. I'm not really sure. Let me see. Can you check that for us? Maybe you may have to edit this part out. But wife inheritance, in that when the husband dies, his relatives or whatever think that, the wife is theirs now. So they pass the wife on to his brother or whatever, and she becomes...
Oh, yes. I think it's Igbo culture. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's Igbo culture as well. And I think, like, at the same time, as horrible as it is, I can kind of see why they would think that, okay, we're protecting this woman actually, because, once a woman's husband has died, probably people will think she's no longer useful to society. Who's going to marry her? And marriage was the only way that women had to survive, really. Mm-hmm. So what else was she going to do? So it was a way of protecting her. But then at the same time, it just removes all agency. Like, is this not a person? How can you say she's my property now because her husband died? Like,
right.
no, her husband's property is your property, including the wife. It's tragic.
Yes, so we know how culture is basically a way of life, and how cultural preservation includes the preservation of history, art, culture, language and stuff, music, drama, everything. So do you think there are any what positive side of cultural preservation do you advocate for?
I think there are so many positive sides of cultural preservation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons that, we started Oriire, because we wanted, those good things about culture. And basically we wanted people to learn about culture anyway, because I think even the good and the bad stuff should be remembered, because that's how you learn. You learn from like knowing what people in the past did. But as for the good parts, there's, all our festivals, even the traditional religions are interesting enough to learn about. Like, I'm not saying, you should become a traditional worshiper or whatever, but it's kind of good to know about this stuff. And also, arts. There's so much great African art, and a lot of the techniques and stuff used hasn't really been preserved and passed down well enough. Literature, there's, our clothes, there's the way that we make some of our textiles, there's our food, how we cook food, how we harvest ingredients, all that stuff. And just there are a lot of wonderful things about African culture that I think, should be preserved, should be carried on.
And I think
sorry.
Oh, okay. And I think besides the fact that culture is a huge part of our identity, I also think the economic benefits of preserving our cultures, I don't think we talk about that enough. So like museums, all these like historical sites and everything, I feel like if African countries like invest in cleaning them up and advertising them, that's like a huge revenue boosting thing for us that will be beneficial to not just the government but to everyone if they share the money.
So much that we can show the world. Like if you just look at other countries like India and how much like rich culture that has been exported to the world, that so much that like people know all about, their own culture, their own practices. People all over the place in Africa wear saris, like, because it's something that's traveled so far. So why can't we, showcase our culture like that? And then when you think about all the tourism that we're missing out on, tourism could be one of the biggest like pillars of the economy if only we would put a little bit into cultivating it and into security, especially because that's a major problem.
You don't want to get stolen while touring somewhere.
There's so many beautiful places, and there's so much beautiful art and stuff to display that is in museums all over the world. All our stuff is in museums in Britain, because we don't have anywhere to keep it here, first of all. And to be honest, I'm even scared because if they say, okay, let them return all the Nigerian
stuff.
If they say, let them return all the Nigerian stuff to Nigeria, how long will it last before someone?
But I think they're doing that. I recently, a couple of months ago, I saw something about them returning one head to Edo or something. So I think they're doing that. They're trying to like put back cultural artifacts back in their original countries. I don't think it's sustainable, but we'll see. I don't get
the idea of it too, but I don't know if we are ready for it.
We're ready for it.
Can really sustain. I feel like the things will just degrade and see them. Although I hope that's not the case. So I'm going to try and be optimistic about it, even though optimism here is doesn't always pay off.
Okay, so besides preserving our food, fashion, literature, celebrations, and the economic benefits of that, do you have any other thing to add, like on why we should preserve our culture?
On why?
Or what other aspects of culture we can preserve?
Yeah, we can. I mean, we have all these herbal solutions.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, we have skin remedies, we have herbal remedies, we have herbal medicine. I don't know that I'm a big believer in herbal medicine myself, but I believe in skin remedies and stuff like that, like shea butter, which I think is just a miracle creation, and it's a big export to other parts of the world. And I believe shea butter is even produced in Nigeria, but Ghana probably is the biggest exporter of that, and I think they even have a museum. I like the it takes a village culture, it takes a village mentality that a lot of Africans have. Yeah. Yes, because it helps. It helps, in societies where, let's say, there are like single mothers or the people who just, can't hack it themselves. It's good to know that there's a community of people around you that like will help, will prop you up and not like mind their own business, because that happens in a lot of other societies, is that people are just about that like face fronts.
But do you think that the whole culture of togetherness is still, it has been preserved? Do you think we've lost it? Do you think we're as together as we used to be, say, 20 years ago?
I don't know. I mean, while I think the culture of togetherness and I think the village is a good thing, I can also see some drawbacks of it as well. So I don't know that it's something that should be so rigidly preserved. So I'm kind of okay with it fading just a little bit, but it should still stay there, because I can just see so many drawbacks of people not minding their own business and thinking that you have a say in every single thing that you do and like your children do. I don't know. So I don't know that we're exactly as together as we used to be, but maybe that's good and maybe that's bad. I don't know. What do you think?
I think personally, I think it's good. I think it has to fade a bit, because the truth is that a lot of our cultures, like, for example, the killing of twins, the family in everyone's business, the women getting married at certain ages and stuff, those type of things are very toxic. And I think if you want to advance your culture or just implement other, let's say, Western culture with it, I think that's okay. Because again, I don't think culture should be static. That I just don't agree with that logic. I think we have to keep on evolving. While human beings, we can't just like stay in one place. So I think if you want to promote independence, that's okay. And if you also want to promote the collective African ideology, that's okay too. So I think there has to be a limit, really, like a balance, not a limit. We have to learn to balance it out.
That culture should not be static. And I think that's something that a lot of people need to kind of understand.
Yeah.
You cannot keep saying this is our culture of things that we were doing, decades ago, and be like, no, this is how we do it. This is how we must continue doing it now. Culture has evolved, okay? Even things that we are doing now will become part of our culture, 50 years from now. So who says that like we have to so rigidly hold on to that? I bet that even the one you think is so rigidly your culture probably evolved from something else before.
Definitely. I think that's what most people don't understand, that all this culture and all these like things that we call culture, they migrated from somewhere or they evolved from somewhere. It just didn't start like that. Someone started the whole bride price thing. Someone started the whole, okay, let's make bride price like super long. Someone said, okay, like it all started from somewhere. It just didn't start like that. So I think people need to understand that culture is not something that's original, for a lack of better word. It is not original. It keeps on. People keep recycling it and adding their own things to it.
Exactly. One of the final things I want to say, though, is that sometimes what you think is your culture is actually not your culture at all.
Yeah.
So go and explore it and make sure that it's not something that they brought to you during colonization that you took hook, line, and sinker, and now you think that this is how people from your society always did it. So yeah, it's something that, we kind of need to draw those lines and actually realize what actually is it that our ancestors did and what is it that we were kind of influenced by, the British when they came to start doing and start thinking that, oh yeah, this is actually what we've always done, when that's not.
But okay, just another quick question. You know how African countries, a lot of them, in fact almost all of them, are super religious with like non-traditional religions. They do every other religion and they perform every other religion besides African religion. What do you think about that? Do you think because I think it's very hypocritical, because they keep saying, okay, we're preserving our culture, and on the other hand they're still practicing religion of another culture. Like how do you balance that out, like, if that makes sense?
Actually, I thought we should actually do an episode on the Africanization of Western religions. Do you know why? Because I think it's so funny that people so think that they are so Christian. And
exactly. And then they
that a lot of the things you are doing is not Christianity, it's paganism. You don't know. When they tell you to go and bath in river and use black soap, do you think that is from the Bible? Do you think so? It's not. It's paganism. You don't know. But you guys are
some people like what's it called? Drinking certain water, or like cutting themselves with blade and pouring holy water in it. And I'm like, how does this make sense? How?
Like, that's the thing. You don't know that this is actually not African. This is not, this is not Christianity or Islam or whatever. This is your traditional religion. They remix it. They Christianity in there. And you think you are doing a new religion. It's not. You don't know, but it's true. Really, so I think a lot of people actually need to understand that as well. In that, and I'm not saying that, there's only one version of Christianity or there's only one version of whatever, because there's not. But then the thing is, you don't think that you are doing what you are doing is the only correct version.
Correct. Honestly,
someone else will come and tell you, no, what you are doing is actually not. It's not what you think you're doing at all. And I find
I think the final thing we should discuss is whose responsibility is it to preserve culture? Do you think it's individual? Is like it has to be taught in schools? It has to be the government by creating museums and stuff? Whose responsibility do you think it is?
I don't believe there's one answer to that. I think it is everyone's responsibility. So the government has a part to play in this. Then individuals have a part to play as well. And it should be something that like people should take up on the mantle themselves, but also they should be encouraged to do so by their government. And especially because there is there not a Ministry of Culture? Like, I think I keep saying this.
I think there's a Ministry of Cultural Preservation. That's the irony. I think there's a Ministry of Cultural Preservation.
They don't promote cultural preservation. I bet they just, anyway. So it's everyone's responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty then. I think that's it. Do you have anything else to add? Do you have anything to say?
I just want to say, I think that for a lot of people who want to cling on to tradition, it's important for you to really examine it and understand that, okay, tradition evolves, things happen, life happens, and you can't keep holding on to things from 50 years ago so doggedly and calling everyone else wrong for saying let's move on from that.
Yeah, I think my own final words will be that just try to visit museums in wherever you are. I think there are museums in most places, but also be careful, because if you get kidnapped, it's not me that advised you. But then also visit historical sites. I think there's this thing in Nigeria. There's Idonre Hills. There's Oshogbo something. So just check them out. Google it. I think UNESCO has this thing called World Heritage Sites. So just check them out. There are a lot of resources there. Experience other cultures and everything besides your own ethnic group culture and stuff. So
yes, and visit our website where we educate you about African culture. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. We want to remind you once again that we will probably be discussing this in a forum on the website, so you can go on there and let us know your views and any thoughts that you have. And also, if you have any idea for a podcast topic that we should have, we would love to hear from you. You can also just contact us directly on our website, which is oriire.com. That's ORIIRE. And so that you don't miss any part of the conversation, please follow us on social media. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram, where we are Oriire_Africa. And stay in touch. Also, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the next episode.
Yeah. And merci pour l'écoute, guys. Thank you for listening in French. Honestly, I feel like I'm super language inclined.
Yes.
And
merci pour l'écoute.
Merci pour l'écoute. I heard that on Google, but I listened to that thing, those Google voice thing. I kept listening to it. The person that was sounding was like, merci pour l'écoute, but I'm like, I'm not going to say that. So I'm just going to pronounce every syllable in it. So merci pour l'écoute, guys. Au revoir.
Au revoir.